We're going to start AFC South today. Let's get into it. 32 teams. 32 shows.
Oh, yeah, it was calculated. 32 teams, something amount of shows, and it blows up.
All right, Titans, let's go.
Tennessee Titans here. 12-5 last year, first in the South. They were the number one overall seed in the AFC, but the eventual Super Bowl runner-up, Cincinnati Bengals, took them out in the divisional round. Mike Vrabel's coming back for his fourth season here. Todd Downing, offensive coordinator. Shane Bowen is the defensive coordinator there for them. They played a lot of the season last year without Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, of course, the kind of glue that held this team together at the beginning of the season. And they went through a stretch in the middle of the season where they didn't play some of their best games. And I don't know if that's even necessarily because Derrick Henry wasn't out there. I think there was a lot of that had to do with just some regression, right? I mean, I think this team really outkicked their coverage last year at 12-5, and some of the advanced statistics actually bear that out as well. We'll talk about those a little bit later here. But if you're looking at what this team is going to look like and how it's going to be either the same or different, in for them, Robert Woods, Austin Hooper, safety A.J. Moore, an edge rusher in DeMarcus Walker, left tackle in Jamarco Jones, but out a lot of guys and a lot of familiar names as well whenever we're talking about the outside of things. Wide receiver A.J. Brown was traded to the Eagles. Wide receiver Julio Jones remains a free agent. Right guard Roger Saffold is out. Linebacker Jayden Brown is out. D'Onta Foreman, who stepped in and had a decent role whenever Derrick Henry went down, he's gone. Right guard David Quisenberry is gone. Tight end Anthony Ferkser is gone. Linebacker Rashaan Evans is gone. So there are a lot of guys that were major contributors for this team over the last couple of years that are no longer. I can't believe Robinson Cano just got a hit.
I was waiting for you to see it.
Robinson Cano just got a hit against us here in the bottom of the third. Just not our night, guys. So a lot of guys that were major contributors, of course, your top two wide receivers being the biggest two that are gone out of this team now. So what do? They go in, of course, Robert Woods comes in off of that injury, though. Will he be the same Robert Woods? That's something we'll have to figure out. But they do address it in the first round of the draft, as many people expected them to do. Wide receiver Treylon Burks was taken in the first round to come in and step in, and he's going to have to contribute right away. I mean, that's just kind of how they have this thing set up and designed. They drafted a corner Roger McCreary in the second round. They drafted an offensive tackle in the third round. And then the other third-round draft pick was the one that everybody was sitting there waiting on, and Malik Willis finally came off the board in the third round. A lot of people thinking Malik Willis was going to go in the first round. That didn't end up happening. Malik Willis comes off the board in the third round in a very interesting landing spot here for him, because there are a lot of people out there who are not sold on Ryan Tannehill, and there are a lot of people out there who think Ryan Tannehill's ceiling has already been met. Maybe. And you kind of know what you have in Tannehill, and if anything, we're yet to really see the true Ryan Tannehill. We kind of played above his head a little bit here the last couple of years, and it really helps when you have a Derrick Henry, when you have an A.J. Brown, when you have stuff like that. I mean, it can hide some of the warts of a quarterback, and certainly the offensive line for them was pretty good as well. Not looking to be as good this year as we go out. They took a running back in Hassan Haskins in the fourth round, tight end in the fourth round as well, and then they ended up taking another wide receiver in Kyle Phillips, who looks to be maybe just a spot bit contributor for them in the fifth round if he even ends up making the team. But that's kind of how they went and addressed some of the stuff over the draft as well, Ben. So, I mean, look, it's a lot of people looking at Treylon Burks and trying to say, hey, he's going to instantly step in and have to really contribute. And I agree. That being said, I think internally they're still looking at Robert Woods as being your true wide receiver one, and Treylon Burks kind of being your wide receiver two, who then grows maybe into that wide receiver one role, despite the fact that they spent a first-round pick on him. Because if you bring in Robert Woods, a guy with a ton of experience, a guy that has been a major contributor, really kind of always under the radar, I feel like, but has been a major contributor since he's been in the NFL, I'm pretty sure they look at him as the guy, and Treylon Burks being kind of more that number two secondary option.
And it's like on the Derrick Henry side too, and you think about all the wide receiver issues, and it's more just a reshuffling of the deck there with the personnel. What will we get out of that realistically? But at the end of the day, you're kind of banking on the production that we've seen out of Derrick Henry, a guy who's rushed for over 4,500 yards over the last 2.5 years. What realistically do you expect for him? A guy who's now had the injury concerns kind of added onto his nameplate here.
So here's the thing: we know the one position where guys fall off a cliff faster than any other position is the running back position. Like, we know this for sure. We've seen it time and time again. Cornerback being the second position where guys just fall off a cliff instantly. They wake up one day and they're old. But running backs is certainly that position. And now we're talking about a guy who has an incredible workload since he's been in the NFL and is coming off of an injury and has a worse offensive line than he's had since he's been there as well. So I think the production for Derrick Henry probably goes way down, and I think the production goes way down too because I actually think that this team is not going to be as good, which then if you're not as good, you're losing and you're trailing in games, and if you're trailing in games, then you have to throw more. So I think there's a lot of reasons to think that this is kind of a bearish season for Henry.
We'll run down all the positional rankings heading into this year for the Titans. Where do they factor into the AFC South second betting favorites? We'll continue the discussion on Tennessee next. Back to the Tennessee Titans. We were beginning the discussion on Tennessee before the break, and a team who is the second betting favorite now, Matt, to come out of the AFC South, largely because of two vastly rebuilding teams below them in Jacksonville and Houston. But you look at the general numbers on them coming in, Pro Football Focus, they've got their offensive line 27th, the wide receiver room 26th, the running back room 6th, thanks to the presence of one Derrick Henry. Defensively, the linebacking core 10th, linebacker group 16th, and then the secondary 11th.
Yeah,
so the defense they're a little higher on.
But if we look back on this team, right, it would start here because, like I said, I think that whenever we look at this team moving forward, I think that they really kind of outkicked their coverage last year with this 12-5. And so you kind of look back and you start to look at these advanced stats as to where they fell last year. And it's like the 20th overall team according to DVOA. Now, listen, DVOA isn't the end-all be-all, and I actually disagree with some of the stuff that they came out of with last season, but it just lets you know, even if they're off 5 spots as to whatever, I mean, this team would be a middle of the pack team overall, whereas they were the number 1 seed in the AFC, right? And so you're looking at a team that really was the benefit of some fortune and really did kind of get absolute maximum out of what they were given here. I mean, this 20th overall offense, the defense actually played, considering the talent that they had on that defense actually played really, really well. 12th overall defense, and then 23rd on the special teams side of things as well. So, I mean, that's kind of where you look here. Now, moving forward, you come into a team that was 20th in offense, and you lose your game-changing playmaker in A.J. Brown. You lose your secondary receiver in Julio Jones. That is replaced by a guy, as you mentioned. I mean, the pass-catching group ranked 26th coming into the year by Pro Football Focus. Woods is 30 years old coming off of an ACL. I mean, listen, he's a good NFL player when he was healthy, but he's a 30-year-old coming off an ACL injury. So you're trying to replace an A.J. Brown with a 30-year-old coming off of an ACL surgery. Then Julio Jones, even though he wasn't all that productive while he was in Tennessee, due to a lot of that had due to injuries as well, you have a guy that is now trying to replace a legend with a rookie, right? I mean, and that also is something that I think is going to be pretty challenging and pretty daunting with this. And like Austin Hooper as a tight end, he's fine, right? I mean, he's fine, but he's fine. That's just it. I mean, like, he's fine. He's not good. He's not bad. He's fine. He would be a league average tight end when it all came down to it. That, coupled with the fact that it's the 27th ranked offensive line coming into the season with Taylor Lewan, a guy who's struggled really mightily to stay on the field, and that's been a big problem for this Tennessee team. Jamarco Jones is going to have to be a guy that's going to step in and play as a youngster. Ben Jones, Nate Davis, Dylan Runs. These are all guys that don't have any real pedigree in playing at a high level in the NFL. And so what you look at here with Ryan Tannehill is a guy that actually graded out pretty well last year, according to Football Focus, 83.7 on the year, but he did have 22 turnover-worthy plays, which was 8th most in the NFL. He threw 14 picks, which was the 6th most in the NFL. And you look at this offensive line that got exponentially worse with 2 guys leaving, and Ryan Tannehill with a clean pocket had an 89.9 passer rating. Pressured pocket, 57.6, right? So a massive drop-off from when he had clean to when he was pressured. And now you have a worse offensive line coming in. Maybe a Derrick Henry that could be – I think it's fair for us to say that he can still be a stud while also being on the downside of his career. You know, I mean,
Sure, yeah.
He's
fantastic.
He's older. He's injured. He's whatever. Like, we can still say, hey, he's still an upper 10, 8, 5 running back in the league.
So you're talking about Djokovic earlier.
Right, but
he's still
on
great,
the downside
but he's getting older.
Yeah, but still on the downside of his career, right? And so, you know, which also then makes this doubly hard because you have a running back that maybe have lost even if it's a quarter of a step, but he's going to be running behind an offensive line that is much weaker than it was a season before, and I think an overall team that comes out probably weaker than time before. So now you're forcing Ryan Tannehill into passing situations where teams are going to know that it's a passing situation, so they can pin their ears back and they can blitz and they can rush and they can do all kinds of things and try to get creative to mix things up. And who's he going to be throwing to? Again, a 30-year-old coming off an ACL and a rookie. So I think on the offensive side of the ball, it could be a pretty big struggle for them. Now, the defense does look like it can bail them out at times, right? I mean, the defensive line, Jeffrey Simmons is a stud. Like, Jeffrey Simmons is legitimate, a dude that could end up being super special in this league. Had 62 quarterback pressures last year and probably has some upside for more here. And then you bring him in, Danico Autry, Bud Dupree, Harold Landry as well on this defensive line. So, like, I think this defensive line is going to be pretty stout, right, in all aspects against the run and rushing the passer.
And kind of like you said before, Matt, they even ended up rating out last year better than I thought.
Yeah.
Like, looking back last night, like they ended up finishing the year better than I remember them finishing the year last year.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this defense was the unheralded hero of this team last year, where everyone was talking about Derrick Henry and everyone was talking about A.J. Brown and everyone's talking about Ryan Tannehill, like, you know, I can't believe Ryan Tannehill's playing this well, et cetera, et cetera, when really it was like the defense that probably was the hero for this squad.
Remember, that was a team, Matt, coming into last year was pretty much a consensus bottom 5 defense. Only 2 teams spent less money on their defense in general coming into last year than Tennessee, and really their only addition was Bud Dupree from Pittsburgh, who was coming off an ACL. And then, as you laid out with the numbers, talk about over exceeding your expectations. I mean, that was the prime example there from last year.
And then you got the secondary here that is actually pretty good as well. So you have a defensive line that's probably going to be able to get a decent amount of pressure on quarterbacks with a secondary in Christian Fulton, Caleb Farley, Elijah Molden, and you have Kevin Byard, and you have Amani Hooker at the safety positions. Look, Caleb Farley did only play 60 snaps before an ACL injury, which ended his rookie season. So that's going to be something where he's going to have to, that said, only playing that few snaps, he's had a long time to recover. It wasn't one of those mid-season type injuries for him. It's been a long recovery period. So Christian Fulton, we know, proven good corner. If Caleb Farley lives up to what everyone believes that he could be, and then you have Hooker there at the safety position, I think the secondary could be pretty great as well. So, I mean, that is the thing that is the real strength of this team moving forward, is going to be the defensive side of the ball, which I think will bail them out a lot of times from what I consider to be probably one of the bottom third offenses, if not worse, in the league as we enter this season. So, but really it comes down to is what are they going to do with these games that they're supposed to win, Ben?
Right.
I mean, it's the 12th toughest schedule, so it's not quite middle of the pack. It's not on the hardest end, but it's certainly not on the easiest end. 12th hardest schedule. If you look at Warren Sharp, he's got them projected at 9.4 wins on the season. And you take a look here, and it's like these games they're supposed to win. Do they win those games? Do they win this opener here with the Giants? Do they win on the road at the Commanders? Do they go to the Texans and take care of business and not stumble, which, by the way, last year they lost in this, and we think that team is probably even better than it is now. You're going to have to win one of these games in this latter half of the schedule. You're going to have to win either on the road at the Eagles or on the road at the Chargers or something. You can't just rely on the Jags and Texans and the Giants of the world if you expect to make the playoffs yet again. And so they're going to have to take care of business on all the games that they have to win, and then they're going to have to win at least a few games that they're going to be underdogs. And I honestly think if you look at this schedule, Ben, if you take a look, I mean, they're dogs against the Bills, the Raiders. They're dogs against the Colts. They're going to be dogs against the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Packers, the Bengals. Are going to be dogs against the Chargers. They're going to be dogs against the Cowboys. So, I mean, like, they're going to have to win one of those games. Like, they're going to have to win probably 3 of those games that they're going to make.
An early bye too. I mean,
Yeah.
a week 6 bye. That's not exactly ideal either.
This is where this is where the AFC is just so crazy this year because I mean you're talking about -110 on each side for the yes/no playoffs. I couldn't make a bet on that because it's. Do I think every team in the AFC West is better than the Titans? Yes, but just frankly, with the 2 divisions that they face, it's so much easier for the Titans just in division that they could end up stealing one of those playoff spots easily. I would tend to lean no still, but I think this is a team I just can't do much with betting wise.
Even the to lose in the wild card round, which we showed up earlier, stage of elimination, plus 225. Is that really enough bang for your buck when you consider how wide open this all is? I don't know.
I'm bearish on the Titans, but I don't think it's going to induce any bets for me.
Okay.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.